morning, everyone. Thank you for getting out of bed bright and early this morning and joining us for Chat and Chew. I'm really excited to introduce Hot Topics today. So my name is Betsy Ann Huggins. I'm the Education Manager at Actors Theater of Louisville. Today's workshop is going to be a little different from the ones you've engaged with so far. Today we have three fabulous speakers who are each going to be giving a short TED-style presentation on a different hot topic shaping the American theater. Today, we're first going to hear from Michael Whatley. He's going to be talking about theater collaboration and teamwork. Lexy Leuszler will be talking about offstage community initiatives at regional theaters. And finally, Graney will be talking about student loan management and financial self-advocacy. So it's a really great platform today. Hopefully you'll leave with a lot of really great ideas to take back with you, both for your college theater and for your life in general. So I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker of the day. After we have all of our presenters do their TED Talk, we will have 15 minutes for a Q&A, so please hold all questions to the end. You'll have time to engage with the speakers with any specific questions you might have about their work. So first off, today we've got Michael Whatley. He's the Associate Production Manager at Actors Theater of Louisville. He's also a freelance writer for HowlRound.com and a board member of Center Stage at the Jewish Community Center. Michael is also a proud alumnus of the 2011, 2012, and 2012-2013 professional training companies. Please welcome to the stage, Michael Whatley.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. Soon after I graduated from college, I had the opportunity to be the assistant director for a Humana festival production, which partly because I had attended college days 3 times myself was a pretty big deal for me. I asked some of my friends who had been assistant directors, what is the key to doing this well? And all of their advice was pretty much in the same vein. Ask the director what she wants you to do, and then do that. But probably you won't be expected to do anything. Watch, don't participate, take down the notes that she dictates to you, but generally speaking, just try to stay out of the way. This advice reminded me of some of my first forays into professional theater, which were set in the swampy, smushy, and uncomfortable land of summer stocks. I long for the day that picture doesn't get a laugh. I worked as a technician and a designer at summer stock companies in Virginia, Kentucky, and North Carolina as a technician and a designer. And I found an interesting trend, which I will refer to here as the fleekness of meekness, TM. Essentially, I was working and living with really smart, creative people who took their instructions quietly, did their work efficiently and well, and then after work, we'd complain about what we were doing and question the processes that were going through all of our things that we were about. I'd say things like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't make sense to weld right next to the furnace. That does seem like really not a good idea. And they would say things like, well, I'm sure there's a reason that it's this way, or it's not terrifying if you don't think about it too much. That's the fleekness of meekness. The notion that it's fashionable, and indeed even helpful, not to bother anyone with your ideas. And everywhere I went between then and now, there are people who have tried to stay fleek by being meek. So I'm the assistant director for this production, and we're in rehearsals, and even though it doesn't totally make sense to me, I'm following the advice. I don't look anybody directly in the eye. I sort of move around the room like I'm trying to stage a heist. It's like I'm just not trying to spook the art or anything. But I hear the director talk again and again about how the show doesn't have a scenic model and how frustrating that is for him. The show had a lot of transitions. Things were coming up to the floor. And because the set designer was working on so many different productions at that point, he hadn't had time to create a scenic model. And I just keep creeping. So let's do a quick show of hands. How many of you have ever heard or read something in the last 6 months that described the making of a play or the organizing of a theater as a collaborative experience? Collaboration. We're all in this together. It's going to do 1, 2, 3, everybody. Okay, great. Put your hands down. Next question. How many of you have ever heard of the making of a play or the organizing of a theater as a highly hierarchical activity? Hierarchy, where everybody needs to stay in one... Wow, okay, it's a surprising number of you. Not as many as the collaboration. We'll keep that in mind for later. So I'm still the assistant director for this show, and I hear the director complain again about the model. and I just can't take it anymore. In addition to being the assistant director, I also happened to be the production management intern at the time. So I went down to our storage room and I pulled an old model out. I ripped out the insides. I printed out a carpet layout from the design packet, sandwiched it in there with some Frankenstein model pieces from other shows, and created this. Guys, this is not a good-looking model, okay? Some lovable buffoon made this model in 2 hours with a glue stick, a Sharpie, and some model pieces from other shows. But after I took that model into rehearsal the next day, I was treated like a true collaborator because I had collaborated. So when everything that we're told about theater, that we read in books and our curricula is about collaboration and teamwork, and less about hierarchy. Maybe not none, but less is certainly about hierarchy than collaboration. What makes the fleekness of meekness attractive? Generally, I think that talented people embrace the fleek because of 2 reasons. Unfortunate managers or self-doubt. So let's talk a little bit about unfortunate managers. If you're working for people or with people who genuinely do not want your input, I think that those people are not worth working for. But let's say that you're committed to a project and you want to do it well, but you simultaneously feel like you're working with a team that doesn't want you to participate. I'm going to give you the same advice that Vanilla Ice gave to me when I first started working in theater. Stop, collaborate, and listen. To be honest, this is not the only piece of professional advice he's given me. I also end every cover letter I've ever written with the phrase, if there's a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it. Okay, step 1, stop. Stop. If you're doing something, take it, and you have an idea, take a second and stop. Stopping for a moment to acknowledge the idea, I think, is important. Okay, because ideas hardly ever come to me fully formed. They need time to grow from little idea seeds into theory trees, or as I like to call them, theo trees. TM. So stop for a second. Ask questions. Do your research. Is there a theater that's already doing the thing that you want to be doing? Is there a way that you can partner with them on it? Ask questions. Flesh out your idea. Develop self-awareness. So I think that if you get into the habit of doing something, especially as it revolves around a play, you have a tendency to forget to think critically about why it is you're doing the thing that you're doing. So stop and ask yourself, is this thing that I'm doing, is it A, dangerous, B, unnecessary, or C, stupid? And if the answer to any of those questions is yes, stop, and then collaborate. Collaboration is a tricky thing, but generally I want to say that if you have a good idea that you have researched and thought about, people are going to be willing to work with you on it. And collaboration is tricky. It takes many forms. There are right ways and wrong ways to go about it. I would say that unless you're a Machiavellian genius, that you should try to refrain from managing up. I don't know, maybe I'm just bad at it, but I find that when I try to manipulate people, it backfires on me. That sincerity is really the way to go for efficiency's sake, if not for, just being a good person. I find this to be true not only in the professional world, but also in the dating world. Not that those worlds ever collide. Moving on. Identify obstacles, name the problem, figure out what you're trying to fix, and then bring other people together to help you fix that problem. Last year, we realized that we were having a lot of trouble tracking script changes in Humana Festival shows. And so after the festival was over, we brought together the literary and stage management departments, and we said, how can we make this better? And so this year, we've gone through a brand new process where the stage managers track changes that based on a methodology created by the literary department. Let me be clear, I had very little to do with making that system. And if I had tried, as the assistant production manager, to come in and say, this is the problem, and this is how we're going to fix it, that probably wouldn't have been very welcome. But if you can identify the problem and bring people together, you can be an agent of change no matter what your actual title is. Step 3, listen. So I have a lot of colleagues who would argue that perhaps this is the most important of the 3 steps. Spoiler alert, I disagree. I think that they're all important. But yes, as you go through your career, you should absolutely be absorbing as much as you can about how and why people work the way that they do. I call this learning, TM. And learning by absorption is great if that's a way that you operate. But be patient if at first you're learning from people who aren't the best at explaining the how and why it is they do the things that they do. But absolutely listen. Know when to push for something and when to wait. Listen to smart people who know more things than you do, and be prepared to stop, collaborate, and listen all over again. I recently had an idea that will require me to do all three of these things. It's potentially like a game-changing idea, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to bother you with it. Do you see how annoying that is? So the fleetness of newness isn't just something that works on us externally, it's something that builds up our own self-doubts, right? So maybe you're thinking to yourself, I'm just starting out, you know, I don't want to rock the boat, or you'll feel like a fraud, like you snuck into the rehearsal room or the production meeting and you really don't have the right to say anything yet. And to that end, I'd say this. Your theater didn't hire you to do you a favor. They didn't hire you because they thought that you were stupid or silent or uncreative. They hired you because they thought that you were smart and innovative and vital to what they are trying to do. When you're just starting out, you have to bring up issues and challenge preconceived notions because you're new and you have new ideas. Boards of directors and artistic directors already know what they're thinking. The ones worth working for, I think, want to know what you're thinking. Your theaters are counting on you to bring up the issues in sustainability and inclusion, community engagement, the things that are really going to define what theater is to the next generation of artists and audiences. I believe good ideas can come from anywhere, and we need yours. Please do not hide them. Zelda Fitz-Chandler, who was the founder of Arena Stage and a seminal artistic leader, wrote at the beginning of her career, "Who else could define the culture of a theater but its artists? Define its style. Didn't a collective art form require a collective?" Zelda was 26 years old when she founded Arena Stage. I say Zelda like she's my friend. I don't know, she feels like it sometimes when I read her stuff. But she, Miss Fitz-Chandler, we'll call her that, was 26 years old when she founded Arena Stage. John Jory was 31 when he became the artistic director of Actors Theater of Louisville, created the Humana Festival, and changed forever the way that new plays are developed in America. Lin-Manuel Miranda was 28 when In the Heights opened on Broadway. It isn't helpful, fashionable, or fleek to hide your thoughts. Who here has an idea? It's time to share, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, let's give another round of applause for Michael. That was just incredible. And so great to kick off today. We've got two more speakers. The next one up is Lexy Leuszler. She's the Education Associate at Actors Theater of Louisville, and I am lucky enough to work with her every day. She is also the Assistant Director this year for Crying Out. She's a teaching artist, an arts activist, a director, a dramaturg, and she's from a small one-horse town in Kansas. She would specifically like me to let you know that you should forget all of the tornado safety you thought you learned in the movie Twister. It's not true. Please welcome to the stage, Lexy Leuszler.
But when I was a hungry and starry-eyed undergrad, I think I wrote the phrase, "I want to make theater that changes the world," in at least 20 cover letters. And I specifically remember this one interviewer, I said something along the lines of, "I'm only interested in art that interrogates social injustice and oppressions." And their follow-up response was, "Cool. How would you handle an angry customer who wants to come see sold-out Sweeney Todd tonight?" So I'm not throwing shade at my younger self or the idea of art as an instrument of social change. Believe me, I am completely on that bandwagon. I'm just realizing that a few years down the line now, as both an artist and also an administrator, that is a bit more complicated to change the world than programming your entire season full of Brecht and cabaret. And no one wants more than one Brecht play per season, let's be very clear about that. Now these desires of mine, these desires of yours that sound similar, they come from this altruistic place in our hearts and minds. At the best case scenario, I wanted to crack something open in an audience member, sprout something new in their minds about their community. But in the worst case scenario, I was coming off as the Saturday Night Live high school performance troupe screaming, "That's deep," at an unsuspecting audience member. And after I graduated, I pursued this career in nonprofit regional theater. And as I continued this drive to use art as a tool of social change, I met this really interesting obstacle: the audience. So in the regional theater model, we operate on the subscriber ticket model. So your subscribers or your season ticket holders, those are the folks who say, "You know what? I'm going to invest some time and some money in you." They're going to spend a big bulk of money, they're going to buy tickets to you for 9 months, and they're going to hang out with you and enjoy your art. Now how that happens is they build a trust in your institution. They see that your artistic values, your mission statements, align with their personal values. You build a pattern of productions that engages and entertains them, and then they say, hey, let's hang out for a long time. Now, my problem was that as I was coming into this season model, I was saying, how can I politically engage these scripts in the season? And these scripts often included A Christmas Carol, or Dracula, or Peter and the Starcatcher. Oik. It was a lot to tackle, and to be completely honest, it wasn't my job or my place. You know, it's not my wheelhouse to tackle. Seasons are chosen months in advance, and if you look at the landscape of regional theater, subscribers love A Christmas Carol. Like, dead white guy or not, Charles Dickens isn't going anywhere. They love him. And that's fine, because on their own, these scripts do what they're supposed to do, right? They interrogate a bit of the human condition, they entertain you. My problem was that I was asking this big question of how do I lift, these big ideas from these scripts. I was putting the burden on the art itself, when maybe there was another way I could look at this question. As a teaching artist and an educator, my work is what we call forward-facing in the community. It means that I engage one-to-one with community members on almost a daily basis, and that feeds me as an artist to have those personal conversations about the work on stage. And it's what led me to becoming part of the Actors Theater Lobby Enrichment Team. That was a team of volunteer staff members who worked together to curate our lobby spaces for patrons so they could learn about the show pre and post-show, right? That rings some bells for some folks. And it was on this team that I discovered 3 initiatives that helped me understand how I needed to shift the question. And I'm going to share those 3 initiatives with you today. They're awesome because they're easy and free. They're easy and free for you to program at your own institutions or to tailor to your groups. And that question that I shifted to became, how can I change a patron's relationship to their theater spaces so that it changes a larger awareness in themselves, maybe in their immediate community or in their global community? And the first initiative I'm going to talk with you guys about is this awesome one called #PlayOurPart. Now, this was originated actually by Sarah Lunny, the literary manager at Playwrights Horizons, an off-Broadway theater in New York City. And the goal for this was to register voters in theater lobbies for the upcoming 2016 election and eventually future elections. And it came as a no-brainer to us that theaters were the perfect spot for this kind of information because we're open 6 out of 7 days of the week. We see a huge amount of foot traffic. We're open all hours of the day and the night, right? We could provide this civic engagement. So myself, some Actors staff members trained with the Jefferson County Clerk's Office. We offered a nonpartisan site, a table literally in our lobby spaces. And over 5 weeks, we registered 30 brand new voters. We provided crucial updates for 50 already registered voters. We answered countless absentee questions from the PTC, from citizens of Kentucky, from Indiana, and all over the place. And over 22 theaters, which you can see up here behind me, participated in this initiative. Playwrights got some dope people like Ann Washburn and Annie Kaufman, Kelly McAndrew, who was on stage last night, and We're Gonna Be Okay. They sat in those lobbies and they registered people. Now that's great, but my experience at Actors Theater in that first week of the table being open was this mixture on patrons' faces when I asked them, register to vote here, of fear, which was strange, irritation, and an overwhelming amount of confusion. And I remember that first night at the table, 2 people came up to it, and their questions both were, does Dracula have an intermission? Which is fine, that's what we're there for, right? I'm wearing a badge. But we started to shift our tactics. We started to put signs in the box office, put up posts on social media to prep them to come to the table. We began gently guiding them by just having these face-to-face interactions. And eventually, they started to come around to the idea, but I realized when I was talking to them, they were very stymied that a place that they thought was built for entertainment could actually be a space of civic engagement. To them, the lobby spaces were these passive hallways that they used as the vehicle to the final destination, right? The curtain. And what we were trying to shift within them is that they could become these active spaces of actual conversation and engagement. And by the end of our 5 weeks, patrons were flocking up to the table before the deadline, and they were drawing their own connections between the information we were providing and the production of Macbeth on stage. At the time, I had no idea how much the American democratic system would relate to a tale of a corrupt Scottish monarchy read by an insane man, but that's fine, like hindsight's 20/20. But the important thing is they were doing their own work, and we were fulfilling the Merriam-Webster definition of engagement, which means to occupy or to become involved. And patrons were becoming involved with their own civic duties. Now, the second one I want to talk about, some of you may have participated in or you know about. If you don't, get your smartphones out after the presentation, please. But it's called the Ghostlight Project. And the Ghostlight Project was led by some amazing people, including Lisa Peterson, who directed the play behind me, Mia Katibak, who's in recent Alien Abductions, David Henry Hwang, Janine Tessori, countless others. And their idea was that they would get theaters and theater makers to band together in a symbolic moment of action. So on January 19th at 5:30 p.m., the day before the inauguration, Theaters and theater makers, over 500 of us, some universities, there were Broadway houses, off-Broadway, regional theaters, community theaters, high school drama clubs even, banded together to create a symbolic public moment of light, to create a beacon and take a pledge that our spaces would be open, inclusive, and compassionate for all patrons, regardless of age, disability, class, race, sexual orientation, country of origin, immigration status, whatever it was, we were opening our doors to you. And what I realized, there's an image here of us outside of Actors Theater. And we invited guest artists that day, we invited staff, and we invited patrons in the area to join us in this pledge. And as I looked around, we're gathered not even close to the theater space. The biggest thing I took away was that no money was changing hands in this moment. There was no fiscal reason for us all to be gathered in that same space taking that pledge. And as a result of that pledge, Actors Theater, though it seems small, we're in the progress of changing our restroom signage to reflect the gender diversity of all of our patrons. It's a pledge we are honoring, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to those spaces and those facilities. And I know that may seem small and a no-brainer, believe me, I was on that side of the fence as well. But our subscribers and patrons who have been with us for an insane amount of time, they're not used to the facilities being used in that way. We have to provide information to them and to our front of house staff to make this a smooth transition for everyone involved. And so, by putting this information in the lobbies, by prepping them for this change, we are hoping that patrons will begin to recognize community members that they may not have previously, and that they'll understand how to be allies to these community members. And finally, the last project I want to talk to you about is called One Large, and it is my favorite. So One Large we're launching this summer. It was created by Cynthia Kreutz and Joy Katz of the If You Really Love Me art collective, and the idea is dope. They give 100 people free money and a pledge. 100 participants get $10, and they pledge to use it at a Black-owned business in the community. Now, Kreutz and Katz, when they originated this, they wanted to interrupt the flow of money to white businesses in their community in Philadelphia. And the idea is that it's social practice art. It's part performance art, it's part economics, and it's part social engagement. It's amazing. And the associate director of the PTC, John Rooney, brought it to us. We got right behind it. We found a donor really, really quickly. Again, I said these are free. They are. Find your donors, do your research, and we'll talk more about that at the end. We found a donor and we linked it to a production of Detroit 67. We were so excited, Detroit 67 by Dominique Morisseau. We found themes that could overlap. We got our donors, we got all lined up, made our list of businesses, and then our production, due to extreme circumstances, was unfortunately canceled. So the project was tabled for the moment. And it was devastating to some of us organizers. We were desperately trying to think about how can we bring it back, how can we launch it, and we started to revert to those old ways of thinking. Of maybe we can find a piece of art to connect it to launch it. And we were trying to draw these crazy connections between this initiative and Circle Mirror Transformation. Just the ideas weren't there, we were grasping at straws. And so we went back to the table and realized that this initiative isn't driven by the art. It has to be driven by the participants, and it has to be driven by a theater who will commit to the values of this project because it aligns with our mission statement. So I'm happy to say that at a time when our theater is dark, in the summer, Actors has committed to launching this initiative and opening our doors and partnering with the Muhammad Ali Celebration Festival, which is a month-long celebration that celebrates the rich culture of Louisville and the legacy of Ali himself. And I'm happy to launch it at this point, and we're not patting ourselves on the back with this. We're not saying that we're going to fix financial segregation in Louisville. That's not what it is. I'm interested in investigating a tiny geographical shift in a patron's perspective that will lead to a larger shift in them personally to their community members. Let's rephrase that. I'm interested in interrogating a tiny geographical shift in a patron that will reflect to a larger shift for them, for their community. So we're going to launch it this summer. If all goes well, we'll get more funding. It'll stay through the season. It'll be a year-long initiative. And that's the crux of these projects with One Large, with the Ghostlight Project, with #PlayerPart. I'm not interested in radically overthrowing their view of the world overnight. That's not the work we can do. The work we can do is to build a tiny window for them to view their community members through. And the best part about this, like I said, they're easy, they're free, they're right behind me. I will have them for you at the end. And the biggest resource they provide you, if you run a nonprofit and you're worried that you could violate a lobbying clause, they provide talking points for you, so don't let the political implications of these projects scare you. That's my favorite thing about them. They're just tiny toolboxes to provide your patrons so they do their own work in their own communities. And of course, we love when these projects can be tied to a piece of art on stage. It's great when the themes overlap. But what if your action item is a season or a permanent initiative within your theater? What if it begins to reflect your mission statement, your theater's mission statement, your institution, your university, and then your personal mission statement? That's when I think we as theater makers can collectively begin to reach towards that goal of changing the world through art. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lexy. What an incredible hot topic. So we're 2 down, we've got 1 more to go, so hang on with us. And remember, after you will have a moment to ask those burning questions of some of our presenters. So last but certainly not least, we have Graney. You'll recognize him from the Humana Festival. He plays Adam in I Now Pronounce. Graney is an actor and writer based in New York City. He's been seen on and off Broadway, on TV, and in regional theaters across the nation. After graduating from the New York University Graduate Acting Program in 2008, he co-founded the nonprofit Artist Financial Support Group, which helps encourage artists of all stripes to promote financial self-advocacy. So today he'll be talking about student loan management and financial self-advocacy. Please welcome to the stage, Graney.
Hi everyone. So again, my name is Ben. When I graduated in 2008 from NYU grad acting, I had $72,500 worth of student loan debt. Now, today, I have $14,400 worth of student loan debt. Woo! I say that not to freak you out or scare you, but when I got out of school, we realized that there's a lot of shame and isolation that we felt about our student loan debt. And we wanted to stop that and dispel that myth. And the more you get to talk about your number, how much you owe, when you owe it, what all the instruments are of your finances that you sign up with your student loans, the less scary it becomes and the more easy it is to manage. So, when I got out of school, like I said, we didn't know what to do. There was a huge hole in our education. We had a fantastic artistic education at NYU, but we didn't know how to manage our student loan debt. So we got a bunch of our colleagues together from NYU grad acting. We started our own nonprofit, and we came up with this. We seek to educate student and professional artists on financial self-advocacy through workshops and publications, advocate legislative and institutional change concerning the cost of arts education, as well as a more lenient student loan repayment process, and innovate new ways to manage student loan debt and to budget with the erratic income of an artist. So if you are going into the performance side of things, you will have an erratic income. If you're starting out in the admin side and working freelance, you will have an erratic income, and it is incumbent upon you to learn how to budget and manage your student loans with erratic income. So, everything I have to say is just a small portion of what we've learned, which we put into a book. You can get it on Amazon, e-copy or hard copy. Now, if there's one thing I want you all to take away from this little talk, it's financial self-advocacy, which basically just means it is incumbent upon you to read all the rules, read all the fine print, make all the phone calls, ask all the questions about your finances. No one is going to do it for you. And as artists, it's really easy to put it under the rug. But that is the worst thing you can possibly do with your finances. So, let's just see some examples of what that means. Is the interest rate on your credit card too high? Call the credit card company and ask for it to be lowered. Did the bank just charge you an unfair overdraft fee? Call the bank and ask for it to be given back to you. Need a few more days to make a loan payment? Call your lender and ask if you can have more time. We have this kind of myth of these financial institutions as these big immovable objects. But really, they have some kinds of refunds for overdraft fees they can give back to you if you only ask. You only get what you ask for, especially with finances. You can be your own self-advocate for every aspect of your life, and you should. But financial self-advocacy is the easiest way to start practicing. So just a little perspective. I'm sure you guys know somewhat about where we are as a country in the student loan issues we have. So this is from a little while ago. This is a national student loan debt reaches a bonkers $1.2 trillion. We're now closer to $1.4 trillion, which is higher than everything except mortgages. That's a lot of money. So when you get out of school, you need to know what kind of student loans you have and how to deal with them. You're going to see phrases on your student loan statements. They're going to look like this: federal loans, Stafford loans that are unsubsidized and subsidized, direct plus loans, Perkins loans, versus private loans, which is loans that are given out by Wells Fargo or Discover. Now, when we got out of school, we had a lot of shame and isolation about not knowing how basic finance works. Again, we're artists. We didn't want to deal with this stuff. That's not how we think. It's not how we act. So we didn't realize how basic things worked. And there's no shame in that either. We're here to dispel that myth as well. So we're going to start at the beginning, and if anyone doesn't know how this works, no shame. If you do, you're ahead of the curve. Great. So, just a quick example. Let's say you want to take out a loan from a bank for $5,000. They say they're going to charge you a 10% annual percentage rate, which is just called the interest rate. So the interest per year that they're going to charge you for the pleasure of taking out their money is $500. Cool? There's a few more terms that you need to know about your student loans as you start wading into them, and that is subsidized. You're going to see that term a lot, which means the government pays the interest that is accruing while you're in school. Unsubsidized. The government does not pay interest. Most likely, you're going to have a combination of both. Floating interest. Interest that accrues over a time period but does not capitalize into a loan. Now, the interest that's accruing while you're in school is floating interest. It's going to float alongside your loan. Capitalization. When unpaid interest is folded into the base amount of your loan, causing the loan to increase in size. When you graduate, this happens. Capitalization. So let's take a look at an example of an unsubsidized loan for an independent student. And let's say you take out your first year, you take out the maximum amount, $6,000. This is what happens. We're going to use a 6.8 interest rate example. You guys probably have lower interest rates. You're going to school at a time when the interest rates have gone down significantly. So each year, that $6,000 loan accrues $408. We're rounding up, but that's how much it accrues every year. And it goes through 4 interest rate cycles. So you take out $6,000 your first year, but you graduate with $7,632. See how it grew? Let's look at all 4 if you take out the maximum amount of unsubsidized Stafford loans. Each year, you can see the different interest rate cycles. The first year, it goes through 4 interest rate cycles. The second year, 3. Third year, 2. And fourth year, 1. So you took out $26,000. You graduate with $30,284. That's called sticker shock. Realizing you owe more than you thought. It happens with every kind of financial transaction in this country. Home mortgages, auto loans, even the unfair fees that the bank charges you. These things that you don't realize were part of the cost that they originally said they were. How can I avoid sticker shock? If you still have more school to go, can you take out less loans? Did you realize you had loan money left over at the end of one of your years at school? No one is saying you have to take out more. You have to take out the maximum. Can you take out less? The less you take out, the less you have to pay back. Can you look for scholarships, grants, or work study opportunities in places you haven't looked before? You will thank your future self will thank you exponentially if you are able to find money through these different kinds of ways to help pay for the cost of education. So when you graduate, you're going to be immediately put into something called a grace period, which sounds just lovely. An optional period of time at the beginning of repayment during which the lender does not require payment from the borrower, usually 6 months. However, the Artist Financial Support Group has renamed this the prepare period. During this time, you are not going to sit on your laurels. You're going to figure out all the information that you need to figure out how to pay back your loans. Interest rates, who's your lender, who's your servicer, how much do you owe, when do you start owing it, what repayment plan is right for you. And if you can save money during this time, great. That'll help you start a payment. So how do you pay back these things? This is a huge, huge part of student loan repayment, especially with an erratic income of an artist. Now we're going to go through some of the plans. Again, we're using that interest rate example of 6.8. You probably have a very different interest rate. And we're also going to use a consolidated loan of $100,000. That might seem scary to you. If you have more, it might seem small. If you have less, this is just a number that we found over and over again, especially from NYU, let me tell you. So if you don't do anything, you're going to be put in standard repayment, which, as you can see, 10 years, 120 payments is about $1,100. That's like more than rent for most people, especially for artists. That's really tough. Extended, 25 years, 300 payments. It drops it down to about $600, $700. That's getting closer to doable, but that over the life of that loan, because you extended it for 25 years, you're going to be paying way more in interest. Now here we get to the first income-based repayment plan, which I think is the most interesting for people going into the arts. The first one is called the income contingent repayment plan, which is 25 years, 300 payments. It drops it down to about $220. That sounds somewhat doable. It's like an expensive cable bill. The next one is the income-based repayment plan, which drops it down to $92. That's even better. The newest one is called Pay As You Earn. Drops it down to $61. Now this is all with this income of $30,000 with an adjusted gross income of $25,000, which just means the amount of income you've made after your tax deductions. So if you make more or less, these numbers are going to change, right? So I got all this information. Actually, wait, yeah, how can my payment be so low? Negative amortization. Amortization is just a fancy financial term for paying back a loan. It comes from the Latin word mort, meaning death. So if you imagine like your loan is a huge monster, each payment, you're stabbing the monster and it's slowly dying. Negative amortization means you have this huge loan monster, you're stabbing it every month, but instead of dying, it's just going to get bigger and angrier. Now, let's look at why that happens. So on the IBR, ICR, and Pay As You Earn, your loan may increase in amount each year if your payments are less than the interest accruing. So because your loan, you're not required to pay as much, because your loan has such a large interest accruing every year, the small payments aren't covering that, making your loan increase in size. That make sense? Okay, so after 20 or 25 years on these income-based plans, your student loan is forgiven. But there's a huge caveat. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's taxable. So let's say you make $50,000 in 20 years, and your $100,000 loan is forgiven. The government is going to look at your income taxes that year and say, you didn't make $50,000, you made $150,000, and then you're going to have to pay taxes on that. So there's no get-out-of-jail-free card. We recommend these income-based plans because you can start your artistic career with lower-paying jobs, build your credits, build your resume, and you're able to not have to spend so much money on your student loans every month. But the minute you can get on standard repayment, get on it. The minute you can pay back all the interest accruing every year, pay it back. You're going to thank yourself later. I got all this information from studentaid.ed.gov. If you've never been to this website, this is the Department of Education website on student loans. If you read this website top to bottom, every page, you'll become an expert on student loans. Open your statements. Don't be afraid. You're going to start getting mail statements, email statements. The more you put them in a drawer and don't open them, leave them in your inbox unopened, the worse things are going to get. Things can balloon really quickly with this stuff, and you have to stay on top of it. You're going to get notices about selling, who owns your loans, who's your lender, who's your servicer. You have to pay attention to it all. Let's dispel a big myth. Personal suffering does not make an artist great. If your loan situation gets out of control, it will make you suffer, and it will not be good. The more you understand and have your finances under control, the more energy you'll have to focus on your art and career. It's that simple. So this is our website, artistfinancial.org. We're also on Facebook. We post a lot of interesting articles about what's going on in the student loan climate in this country. We're also on Twitter. You're not alone, so don't do it alone. When I got out of school, we didn't really have anyone to turn to, and we're artists ourselves. We're not financial professionals, so you have to use financial self-advocacy to talk to the people you know in your life, financial aid counselors, any financial professionals you have access to, your parents. Everyone's situation is different, so you have to figure out what's right for your financial situation. You can feel free to email us, or me, info@artistfinancial.org, Ben at artistfinancial.org. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. Let's give another round of applause for our three amazing presenters today. How amazing that we have so many talented individuals in our building who are able to talk on such radically different topics. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. Hopefully we'll get some questions for all of our presenters. And we've got about 15 minutes for that. So who's got a question? Raise those hands. We'll start with you.
Hi, this question's for Ben. It's okay if you don't know this, but do you know if, I know if you go to graduate school right after your
Yeah.
loans defer, is it the same for a writer who gets a fellowship at a theater or to develop?
So the question is, if you go to graduate school right after college as a writer and you get a...
Sort of. Like, I know if you go to graduate school, your loans will get deferred, but I'm saying if it's the same situation for a fellowship to develop a loan.
Oh, if it's the same as a fellowship going to graduate school and having your loans deferred. That's a great question.
As far as I know, that's not the case. In order for loans to be deferred, you have to be in an educational institution. So I don't think that's the case, but that's something you can call the fellowship company and ask if they've ever had that before. But as far as I know, that doesn't happen.
I will say that when I joined the PTC, my loans were able to be deferred because the apprenticeship qualified as an educational thing.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Any more questions? Yes.
Ben, can you, I don't actually know the name of this program, but I know that we have a number of people that I understand that use the nonprofit loan forgiveness program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And if you go into any kind of nonprofit work, you qualify for forgiveness in 10 years. As far as I know, you used to not have to pay taxes on that, but now you do. These laws change all the time. So it's something that if you work continuously for 10 years in what the organization qualifies as full-time for a nonprofit organization, or public schools too has a program, your loans will be forgiven in that way. So there's other ways to do it too.
But you have to stay at the same organization.
The same organization, yeah.
No,
You don't?
because I'm enrolled.
Okay, go.
You have to do 10 years of qualifying payments, which means that you have to be super proactive about maintaining your records. But it can be different institutions, and it doesn't have to be 10 years consecutively, but it has to be 10 years of qualifying payments. And they're not, like, as Ben says, like, you have to call them and stay on them to make sure that they're honoring what you think is qualifying payments.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's all over.
Oh, great, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Awesome. So definitely a lot of stuff to look up. It changes all the time, as been said. So keep looking at those different financial aid websites, making sure that you're paying on time. Yes?
I'm wondering if when they change the laws, so like you said for the 10-year nonprofit thing, it used to not be taxed, but now it is taxable. If you had already gotten your like 10 years of qualified recorded record, like paying off your loans, and you now like have loan forgiveness, and you had it not taxable, if they change the law, are you still like grandfathered into the non-taxed loan, or does your life just suddenly now change because the loan that you had thought you had already paid off is now taxable again?
Well, is it already forgiven?
If it's already forgiven, I guess, yeah.
If it's already forgiven, then it's gone.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the grandfather clause was about people who were in the public service loan forgiveness program as the law changed. So if it's already forgiven, it's already forgiven.
But if you are then like that, if you are already involved in it, you're already on your way to loan forgiveness, and then they change the law, does that change dramatically for you, or are you like allowed to kind of continue the promise that you were given?
It really depends on when you took out the loans, when the law went into effect. These are all things that you find on that website I recommended. Yeah, there's a whole page about this very exact program. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's get some questions from Michael and Lexy. Does anyone have questions about? Yes, right in the front.
Yeah, Lexy, I'm intrigued about the One Large program. Can you talk a little bit more about the logistics of how that works?
Yes, totally. So they do, if you go on that website, you'll see they have a lot of media blasts, and then they do have a section called FAQs, and you can actually reach out to Crews and Cats through there. But the way that works is that we found a donor who had a similar mission drive to this project. They gave us $500. The only reason it's called One Large is because they started with $1,000, and that was like $10 doled out to 100 people. But you can start with any dollar amount. So basically, patrons will email us and say that they'd like to commit. We're going to take physical $10 that we have from the $500 from the donor. We put the $10 in an envelope, and in the envelope is a list of the businesses within the city and also a tiny map. They will come to the theater, they'll come to our table at the celebration, they will say, hello, I'm here, I'm Ben, I've signed up online. We're gonna hand them the envelope, and then the pledge is on them. They sign a piece of paper with us. The pledge is on them then to take a picture and post it through social media or send it to us. That way we can map it and say, like, this money was spent here. And it also gives us a way to blast that business again. Of course, this is all on the honor system. I sincerely hope no one would lie with this project, but it is on the honor system of them saying, yes, I will take this money and I will turn it back out. And we are putting a second option on there. So if a patron does this, they start that relationship, a subscriber, and they say, this is an amazing initiative, I want to commit, they can donate to a specific fund also at Actors Theaters. We're going to build that on our website so there can be follow through with that. But Cynthia and Joy are great and are more than welcome because they're trying to launch this. So they've chatted with us over the phone, and they're really flexible to adapt it to whatever arts institution you're working with.
Great, thank you.
All right, down front.
This is a question for Lexy. So what kind of changes in your time with the Actors Theater have you noticed in your audience base?
Yeah, so they're not massive, right? A lot of this is field one-on-one interactions with these folks. Significantly, it was after 5 weeks of having this table, people's responses to coming up to getting this information, and it was because we prepped them for it. Like, in my naivete, I was like, we'll just put this table and I'll shout at them and they'll be excited. No one wants to be shouted at a crowded space. You know what I mean? And it had to be gradual to the Louisville community. We had to use our social media. We had to provide signage in the box office. That's also partially what I mean by signage with our gender diversity commitment. It is about, and I mean, Steppenwolf is doing it. It's about putting the information out there and providing you with all of the information you need to make the choice you want to make, right? And honestly, you can find the results in just talking to your patrons, and more than just expecting them to come up to you and use your services, but engaging with them. I'm really hoping with One Large, of course, we're going to have our social media base to see what that impact is, and we're going to have some type of standing installation in the theater to say, like, here's the map. And again, it's not to applaud us, it is to literally draw out, like, here's a map of businesses. So ideally, maybe they have a pre-show dinner at a different business. Maybe instead of taking their relatives to the Slugger Museum or a distillery, they go to the African American Cultural Center. You know what I mean? We'll see hopefully results from that. But honestly, it's about getting them ready for it because they've been subscribers for a really long time. No one likes change that quickly. It's gonna hurt either way, but it's about sort of providing as much information as you can and then doing your follow-up, talking to them, doing surveys, whatever it is. Does that kind of answer? Okay.
Awesome, down front.
Yes. Great.
And then Neil.
This is for Michael. What is your recommended course of action to take if you are working for a theater company that has upper management or an artistic director who isn't a collaborative person and isn't wanting anyone's input in any collaboration? Just leave, or?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think ultimately you can push people, but in the lower level staffing, it's sometimes difficult to affect immediate large-term change. But I think to Lexy's point about preparing an audience, it's also possible to prepare a staff to be more collaborative. And to be honest, it will be potentially difficult, and you need to know when to stop. And I think, like, pushing people too hard is not a recipe for success for you or for them, but being present, looking for opportunities when they exist, and then sometimes doing it and asking for forgiveness later is part of the key. Like, I didn't ask to make the model, I just made it, So it's possible that I could have done that, and then my boss, who's sitting right up there, could have said, like, well, we needed that model for later, what the hell. But I think, like, sometimes you just do what makes sense to you and trust your gut on that stuff.
Sort of better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for forgiveness.
Not all the time. Not all the time. I think, like, you have to use your own judgment and your own taste to figure out, like, how hard you can push and what is worth pushing for. But there is I think theater surprisingly operates from a place of scarcity and fear a lot of the time. Like, fear that there's not enough time, fear that there's not enough money, fear that, like, you're the only person who actually has it all figured out. And I think that we need to be willing to open up a little bit more.
Yeah, that said, there are toxic theaters out there. And you'll realize when you're there. And if it's time to get out, like, do the best thing for you. It might be better to work retail or wait tables than work at a company that's kind of destroying your spirit. So yeah, heed that heart warning. Yes, right here.
My question is for everyone, but it's about Michael's topic. Do you find that the weakness of meekness is a gendered issue? And how do you navigate varying expectations for collaboration between men and women, or do you think that's an issue at all?
Yeah, so the question is, the fleetness of meekness, does it affect men and women in different ways across the gender line, and how do you collaborate or deal with that issue while also dealing with some gendered expectations, especially in the theater? It's a great question.
Anyone should feel free to answer. I paused for a moment because, like, as a man, I feel weird saying, like, women feel this way. But I haven't done like any demographic surveys about the fleetness of meekness per se at this point. More research needs to be done. But I would say indeed that the fleetness of meekness, that more women do seem intimidated by the idea of speaking out than men do, in my personal experience. And I think that is not a reflection of them, but a reflection of like the culture that we as theaters perpetuate.
In my rehearsal process for this play, the women in the cast were talking about this article that they had read about the women working in the Obama administration, how they would be at a table and one of them would say an idea and they would echo each other, which I thought was just a very interesting idea. I think completely valid, awesome idea. I don't know if you've seen that article, but it's great.
Yeah, the article was about an Obama staff policy that kind of circulated amongst women, where women felt like their voices weren't being heard or recognized at the table, and they made a pact that if a woman said something at the table, the other women would echo it, because often one voice is silenced, but many voices can't be. So it's definitely a strategy that you can try. Yeah.
As someone who was like an assistant dramaturg and a director on the artistic standpoint, yeah, I like cut my teeth a lot trying to figure out how to be a voice that was like actually utilized in the room. Like I was once on a script that we had 2 assistant dramaturgs. Myself and then a gentleman who identified as a male, and I like had been in school 5 years longer, but the director would constantly, like it didn't matter what my expertise was, like there's that deferment. That was the day I decided I would never work with that director again. And I think that's getting back to Michael and Betsy's point of like, if you don't fit, move on. So like that's something I'm constantly reflecting of as an artist, and being in assistant roles, you're very open for that moment. I think as a staff member working on some of these initiatives, it's super easy. I think like women and men in our company like come up with ideas in other regional theaters I've worked at. This is speaking more broadly. I think the tricky thing that I've noticed is that often at the volunteer times or the signups, the volunteer signups are overwhelmingly women. And that is something I've been trying to diagnose of like, where does that impulse come from? Like, why don't the men in the company join in? And sometimes in admin roles, I think there's an overwhelming amount of women in admin positions in theaters. So I don't know if it's part of that, if it's like, we're always trying to figure out any initiatives, which I think the lobby enrichment team and actors is a great example of. Like, we have people from production, we have people from literary, we have people from education. It's like a really open sign up. So I think in that way, we hit the production side, we have more men in the team, but that is something I'm constantly reflecting on of like, why is this systemic to like regional theater admin, or like where that impulse is coming from? I don't know if that answers, but I'm always reflecting about that.
It's a topic that it deserves its own hour or more, frankly, to really delve into some of the gendered politics of theater. So thank you for bringing that question to the table. Let's go over here.
Yeah, this is actually related, and this is for Michael, I guess, but also for Lexy too. So I know what I want to do as an artist, but at the same time, I'm not only a woman, but I'm also really tiny, and I'm worried that like people are gonna see me and like first impression like I'm not gonna take you seriously, right? So what is it? So what? I guess what tips do you have for people for women, but this can also apply to men who are like who do on the outside look like they won't be taken seriously.
if you don't mind me jumping in, I can answer that question as well. It was actually really funny. I was preparing for college days, and a colleague of mine told me I looked like I was 12. And it was a compliment. It was a compliment that, you know,
I get that too, that's why I got it.
that I do look young. And it actually came out a lot early in my career. I'm an educator, and I work with all ages. But if I walk into a middle school, there was a time that people would try and put me in my home room instead of, and I have to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm actually here to teach today. I work for Actors Theater at Louisville. I'm not 12. It sounds dumb, but my advice is simply don't let it bother you. I did have a boss at one point tell me that maybe I shouldn't be working with high schoolers because they wouldn't respect me, because I'd do better with the younger audience, and I said, well, screw that. I want to teach in high school. I want to teach all ages. And a lot of that is just tone and presentation. I still look like a middle schooler. When I walk into a high school, I am not always identified as an adult, but I don't change my appearance. I refuse to change my appearance. How I look is how I look. My size is my size. And so a lot of it is presentational. That I come into a classroom and I'm a bulldog. I'm a bulldog of happiness, but and like positivity and light, and I love my students and I champion my students. But I do notice myself, like I'm an aggressive woman, and so it is presentational as well. So hopefully that helps.
And I think to Betsy's point, like, confidence is important. And I try to go into interviews and situations with new people with the hope that this is going to be the person who can do the job, right? And so I think, like, if you're going into an interview anticipating that this person will be judgmental of you, that's like, you're going into it with a certain negative mindset that maybe like might inhibit a true connection with somebody. And so I think, like, being the most honest, present version of yourself, and if you can do the job, then that's all you need to say, and I will believe you.
Yeah, and I think to Michael's point during his speech about managing up, sometimes it's okay to tell your boss, I really don't care what you think about my looks. I'm gonna do the job anyways, because I'm competent.
Yeah, and if you're, just be the expert. Like, you know, and it's not about like over preparing because of your gender. I think it's really just like be the expert of the material in the room that you're walking in, and you'll boost with that confidence. I mean, like, with my haircut at the time with students, they're like, why is that small extra from Sound of Music, like, talking, you know, leading this class? That small German voice talking to me. But it's like, it is that time. Yeah, I know what that face is, but it is that, like, confidence and pride of, like, no, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk about playwriting, you have no idea what's coming at you, you know, like, and it is being the expert. You'll feel rooted, and you'll feel that, like, come up as you talk to them, you know, and it's really just about, like, dispelling that out of your head that they're gonna put that judgment on me, and if you feel that, get out of there. But,
that might be defined as a toxic environment.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Who's got a juicy one? It could be for any of our panelists. Seems like we've fallen silent. Right here.
Actually, I have a question for Lexy, kind of jumping off of that a little bit. So I'm a female and I want to direct, and I guess my question for you is, how did you get yourself into this line of work, and how did you jump forward and succeed where you are?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of directing, I had the benefit of having some amazing mentors. So I actually mentored with Lexy Leuszler a long time ago at the National Theater Institute, and Rachel Chopkin, and like, they're really take no prisoners. Like, you know, they're strong, they're confident women, and I learned my sort of, I think I modeled my director voice after that, but that is totally a challenge, and I mean, Lee speaks to it all the time of like how to enter a room and be taken seriously sometimes by designers, and it's like constant, you have to be on top of it. I think how I got to where I am, I think oddly education and directing have really similar skill sets, whereas like it's reading a room, A, B, it's being immensely prepared, and then C, it's being super malleable and flexible on the fly. I mean, Betsy, like anyone in the education department can talk to it, and these guys too, as also leaders and facilitators. You're just the expert of the material, you know what you want by the end of the lesson, but you also can read it and flex on the fly. And know, like, you know what, we may not get to that today in the rehearsal room, so we'll wait for the next week. But something I think I constantly battle with, just like a personal sharing, is like I hate saying sorry. I'm also from Kansas, I'm Midwestern, and I'm bred to say sorry when I'm opening a door. Like, you know, like I'm like, would you like a bagel? Sorry, yeah. You know, like, what is that response? So it's something I'm, you know, always reflecting on. At the end of the day in a rehearsal room or in a classroom, I'm just like journaling about like, here's a moment that felt sticky today. and like how can I ease out of that? And I'll call my female mentors if I feel like I need that boost, or I'll go just be like, can I hang out in your rehearsal room, Lisa Peterson, because she's a boss and I want to see like what she does. And like not everyone is the same way. Some female directors like operate completely differently, and that's fine. But those are the styles I know I gravitate toward more, like that style of room. And then it's great that they're also women, but they're also like, I worked with Davis on Cry It Out, and he operates in a similar way, and I found that like both he and Lee talk in similar styles, and how they run a room is very similar. So that's when I knew I was attracted to that kind of room. But they're oddly like very, very similar. You're just diagnosing what's going on with people.
Yeah, well, that's all the time we've got today. Let's give another round of applause to Michael, Lexy, and Ben. Fantastic presentations all.